Hello and welcome to Sunrise Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known as Crease Collector. So for today, we have another fun topic to talk about as the main part of the episode, but starting things off with some housekeeping, I do have a few things to share that have been added to my collection of late. This first one is very much an oddball item. It's not even a card at all. So if you're just here for the cards and you're watching later, you can fast forward, whatever. But this is a really, really cool memorabilia item. A gentleman that my dad helps train, I believe, I hope I'm getting the story right. My dad will correct me later if I'm wrong. But this gentleman owns a sports memorabilia store, and he had this item and gave it to my dad to pass along to me. And so I just got this last weekend, but it's really, really cool. I believe it's from 1972-73, and it is a Phil Esposito hockey skate sharpener. And what's kind of interesting and unique about this, I mean, you'll see the actual sharpener out there, but you don't see stuff like this in its original packaging 50 years after the fact. So just a really cool hockey item. And, obviously Phil is a legend of the sport. So to have a Phil Esposito sponsored item like this in its original packaging is really cool, and certainly not something you see every day.
That's amazing. I wouldn't have guessed that that's what you're going to be showing off, even if you said a card item. I mean, skate sharpener, that's something that I would never have guessed. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So just wanted to start out with that because it is a really cool and unique item for sure. And then turning to the cards, which, like I said, is the reason most of you are here. Let me get rid of the overlay here. This first one is kind of not something I would necessarily pick up super often and stuff like that. But a player that I really like on the current Chicago Blackhawks is Alex Vlasic. He's just a very solid, steady defenseman who, has just come on the scene really well over the last couple seasons. So I've kind of been wanting to add a nice card of his to my collection. So recently I saw a very nice copy of his Cup RPA and was able to add that one to my collection.
Oh, nice. I love that patch.
Yeah, obviously
that's really nice.
the
I know
eye
you
of
have a lot of Blackhawks patches, but that might be up there. Maybe not in terms of color, but I mean, just it's a really nice patch.
Yep, obviously the eye of the Indian head from their logo. So a very easily identifiable patch. And like I said, I just wanted to pick up a nice card of his to add to my collection since I really like him as a player. Like I said, just a very steady defenseman who takes care of things in his own end and has really been tapping into his offensive game of late as well, which is exciting to see. So, he'll definitely be a big piece of the next era of Blackhawks hockey. So being able to pick up a Cup RPA with such a nice patch like this was obviously very, very exciting for me. And, like I said, maybe not something that is, things I pick up or show off every day, but just a really cool card that I added to my collection earlier this week. So there's that. And then we'll step things up on this next one. I know you will dig this one, Aaron. It is a set that we have talked about and shown off a couple times in recent memory. And I will just throw up the image on the screen and then I'll let Aaron react. But it is a butt end.
Oh, no way.
Of Tony Esposito.
Oh, of course you did. That's fantastic. Look at that. I love the first thing that I noticed right away is the two layers of tape. One being the black and then one being the white on the outer edge. I'm wondering if, I'm just spitballing, if the NHL made him put the white tape, because I know it's a rule that you can't have black tape on the knob of your stick. And so it's possible that he was caught with that and then had to retape it over with the black. I've seen that happen before, not with a vintage piece like that, but I've seen goalies have to do the two-tone color there just because they've been caught with a black knob. So I'm wondering if that was the case with this stick here. So just a little added maybe facts about this knob here.
That's cool. Yeah, I was kind of wondering myself what the backstory was there. So
Probably why.
that's
I've seen goalies, like modern goalies, do that. If they've been caught and have the two layers like that. That's probably the only explanation I can tell. It's really cool.
nice. So yeah, and then one thing I kind of like too, it's a little hard to see on the scan. It's more apparent in person, but there's a stamp on the end of the wood that actually says "Made in USA." So just kind of another little cool tidbit of the piece. Not necessarily something you see every day on sticks. Certainly not nowadays for sure. So just a cool piece. And I know when we were talking about at least the flurry, how it fit in a I'll get rid of this on the screen, how it was, the thickness was for a 50 point or a 50 count two-piece box. Well, this one is thicker, so it actually has to be in a 100 count
Look at
box.
that. That's amazing. Yeah, some of the knobs were I guess I'm not sure exactly why, but I guess some of them had to be cut a little different than others. But that's amazing. Wow. Look at
Yeah.
that. It's incredible.
So this one definitely looks like it's the full, like normal thickness of tape, I would say.
It
So
does look very, very close. Yeah.
So definitely really cool. Obviously, Tony Esposito is a goalie that I like, and a player that my dad worked with when he was with the Blackhawks. So yeah, has always just been a more meaningful goalie that that I've enjoyed collecting over the years. So yeah, when Dr. Price put that one, made that one available, he kind of did like every now and then he'll do previews of cards that he will be putting on his website. Like he'll post on certain Facebook groups and stuff like that. And then if you want to basically like pre-claim it, you can do that. So this was one of those cards where he kind of previewed it, and I just said, "Yep, like I gotta have that. Like that's an awesome card." So and fits in my collection perfectly. So
That's awesome.
that was the story on this one, and I've actually had it for a little while, but was waiting to show it off on the show because I wanted to show it to my dad in person first. We were up at my parents' last weekend for kind of a late Thanksgiving, and then we had a wedding last Saturday that we were going to. So made sure to bring this card with me
What
so
does
he
he
could
think
check
of
it
it?
out. He thinks they're really cool. Obviously, very very unique piece, and yeah, obviously, I mean, you guys can see pictures and video and stuff, but to actually hold one in your hand is just a much more unique experience for sure.
So, like, when you first showed him the card, was his reaction oh, that's amazing? Did he know what it was? Like when he first looked at the memorabilia, or it took him a second to kind of know like what he was looking at?
Yeah, I think I explained it like as I was taking it out. So yeah, it was more straightforward, I guess. But
That's really cool.
yeah,
That is
definitely
awesome.
it was fun. So yeah,
Super
definitely
cool.
a very cool card to add to my collection for sure. So yeah, that's now 3 butt end cards that we've shown off in the last couple months here. So they're very cool cards. If you guys haven't seen any others, definitely go on Dr. Price's website, presidentschoicetradingcards.com, and you can see all of the ones that he currently has available for sale. Um, yeah, and if you have a favorite player that there is one of, and you can, afford to pick it up, I would highly encourage that you do because they are very, very unique and cool cards. And I know Aaron, you can attest to that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, they're fantastic and one of a kind. I posted mine a couple days ago on my Instagram page, and really, really cool.
Yep.
People love that stuff.
Yep. Yep. Always cool to have unique stuff. I mean, it's, everybody can have young guns and stuff like that, but something like this is just obviously much more of a unique piece that, it's just, it feels a lot more special. So always enjoy getting cards like that. So that'll wrap things up for the show and tell. If you guys listened to the last episode, you heard us talking a little bit about how the 1979-80 O-Pee-Chee case got relisted at Heritage Auctions after a kind of lengthy saga about the original buyer ended up not paying for it, and then they decided to relist the case in Heritage's most recent auction. So if you guys don't know the context, again, it sold at first back in February for 3.72 million US dollars. And again, like I said, the original buyer didn't pay, got put back up for auction, sold a couple days ago on December 5th for 2.52 million US dollars. So definitely lower than what the initial sale back in February was, which I think a lot of people kind of expected. That wasn't overly surprising for the price to come in lower, since you're obviously missing out on one of the interested buyers. So, but in my opinion, I think that's still a very strong sale price. I didn't really know what to expect with it, but yeah, I mean, to me, that kind of seems and feels about right.
Definitely. I mean, just a crazy story all around. Not surprised by it. I mean, we talked a little bit about it before, but I mean, yeah, I mean, what else more can you say about it? It's just, a certain decisions made, and eventually you kind of have to pay for it, and things come back around, right? So that's a perfect example of that here. So you pay a lot for a case, and then things happen, and you're trying to recoup some, and it doesn't work out that way. So not at all surprised what happened here. And like we mentioned before, it kind of went too high originally. And so although it was a once in a lifetime auction, when it ended, we were both kind of like, okay, this was cool, but that price is like, that's so strange. Like it's not even worth it. And it's such a weird thing, especially when you're talking about such a, you know, like an auction of a lifetime, right? It went from cool to kind of like soured a little bit, like what's going on here with this, you know what I mean? So yeah, so I mean, now we kind of know why, like, some of the pieces kind of fit a little bit more better now. But yeah, and like I said off the top, not at all surprised at this conclusion to the story, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least in my mind, I think especially when it first sold back in February, people were kind of thinking like, what's actually going to happen with the case? Is somebody just going to sit on it? Is somebody actually going to open the boxes? Like, what's going to happen? So, I guess now that's another question that's surfacing again. At least I haven't seen any information about who bought it this time. But maybe we'll find out, and maybe someone will be brave enough to open it up. We shall see. As we've said before, if everything averaged out correctly with the collation throughout the case, there would be 27 Gretzky rookie cards within that case. So obviously, it would be an extremely, extremely entertaining video to watch should someone actually open up the case. And if they were to do that, I would assume that they would be recording when they're doing that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we get any more information or details about what happens with it moving forward.
Definitely. All right, now kind of I mean, if you're Canadian, not really at all surprised by this. You've definitely seen the effects, but we just wanted to jump on here and talk about the Canada Post strike for for 2 seconds here, just to kind of address it. So for those who don't know, and I guess it does affect American sellers and whatnot, especially if you're dealing with us, with your neighbors of the north. So if you don't know, Canada Post went on strike November 15th, and they are still, to a lot of people's surprise, me included, still on strike. So it's definitely an interesting scenario. I'm not going to really get into the whole thing, but both sides seem kind of, like they're standing their ground. They're kind of deadlocked. Canada Post and the union and whatnot. So a lot of different opinions on the matter here up in Canada. So again, we're not going to get into the whole thing, but let's just hope that both sides can come to a resolution on this. And for those who weren't aware, maybe hold off your Canadian shipments for a while, because chances are it will get delayed. And I've already heard, especially in the card community, some people already facing some chargebacks, unfortunately. So let's hope those are resolved in a fair manner. But just wanted to sort of make this sort of public service announcement, so to speak, so no one's caught on the wrong end of this. So again, if you're dealing with any Canadians soon on any trades or buying or selling, just maybe hold off for hopefully a couple more weeks, and maybe before Christmas or maybe shortly after Christmas, we'll have some resolution here. So just wanted to touch on that for 2 seconds.
Yeah, definitely interesting, and obviously is impacting the hobby for sure. Um, I know lots of people who are just saying, "I'm not bothering with trading or buying or selling anything right now involving Canada," just because it's who knows what's going on. So um, yeah, like I even have a deal that I agreed to with somebody probably, I don't know, 2 3 weeks ago at this point, where we were like, "Yep, like here's the deal, and we're just gonna wait, like
Yep,
how however
same
long
boat.
however long it takes, we'll just ride it out, and whenever they're back up and running, then we'll do the deal." But
Even even when they get back up and running, because like I remember the last strike, and I think it was even the strike before that. A lot of times they did rotating strikes, which I think is pretty fair, to sort of clear their existing backlog and then sort of halt incoming mail. But with this one, it's kind of interesting. They kind of halted everything. So not only do you have the stuff that was going to be delivered, you have the incoming stuff that made it past customs, and we're still in the system and then got pushed to Canada Post, and we're just kind of held up there. Um, Obviously, they're not accepting any new things. So because of that existing backlog that wasn't sort of sent out before they stopped accepted incoming mail, they still have that in the queue. So even when the strike does get lifted, you still have that existing backlog that in the previous strike wouldn't have been as bad. So this makes it a little bit interesting. So even if the strike lifts tomorrow, I would honestly still give it a week or two, maybe just to be safe, get them to ship it start of January, just to make sure. I mean, it won't be perfect, but they can get rid of the backlog, as quick as possible and give them that kind of, you know, leeway of 1 or 2 weeks just to sort of, clear some stuff, because once this thing lifts, it's still going to be a headache, I can imagine.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're going to have plenty of people that are like, "Oh, it's finally over," and then they're sending all kinds of stuff,
Exactly.
cards and otherwise. I mean, obviously,
And gifts and
yeah,
everything like that. So
we're
it'll be
entering,
everything.
yeah, entering the holiday season. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people up there are pretty antsy about getting gifts to people and stuff like that. So yeah, like you were saying, even once it's lifted, whenever that may or may not be, um, you know, I would still, like you said, give it that time to let things kind of cycle through and get a little bit more back to normal. But who knows when that may or may not be. Like you said, it sounds like there really hasn't been any
It sounds like
meaningful
January,
progress.
to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Like as we approach Christmas here, I mean, I don't know. So again, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but probably just wait till January to get your stuff shipped at this point. But who knows, really?
Yep, it's been a big mess and a headache for a lot of people, and hopefully it gets resolved sooner than later. But you know, these things are never as simple as a lot of us would like to think they are or should be, and all that. So, but obviously a very important topic going through the hockey card hobby right now, and just the impact that it's had on a lot of people. So, figured it was important to talk about that. So that's kind of all of our introductory housekeeping stuff. The main topic for the episode, as you guys see in the title of the episode, is what we're considering to be the retro design epidemic. And a lot of people will know exactly what we're talking about as soon as you see and hear that. For those that might not understand what that means, over the last, I would say, 2 years in particular, it feels like there has just been a massive wave of retro designs that are included in seemingly every product. Now, it's not actually every single product. I was doing a little bit of research before we jumped on, and I was looking at 23, 24 products, and pretty much every product has at least one straight up recreated retro design or a retro inspired design when you're thinking about something like O-Pee-Chee and O-Pee-Chee Platinum with their retro parallel. Um, you know, while not an actual recreation of a past design, it's obviously based on previous designs. Um, So looking at 23, 24, really the only products that don't have any sort of like a retro presence are product lines that are just much newer and don't have as established, of a history. So you're looking at things like Ingrained and Allure and things like that. SP Retail doesn't have anything, but that's obviously a very basic, straightforward product. But I mean, that's like pretty much it. Like everything else has at least one, two, 5, 10 retro designs. And in some cases, I'm not actually exaggerating when I say that. Obviously, Extended Series is known for all of the retro inserts and stuff, and that's kind of an outlier because that's kind of the intention of the product. But even you look at most products will have at least one, two, three type of retro designs that are included. So, and a lot of people love retro designs. It's nostalgic. You remember these designs from your childhood and when you're getting into collecting and all that. But a lot of people have also come to the realization of this is way too much. Like we just don't need retro in every single product. So yeah, we were talking about that last week, and kind of said, oh, that'd probably be an interesting thing to talk about. So I kind of introduced the topic there, and as another introductory background type of thing, a lot of people might not understand like why there is so much of this. Like I said, obviously the nostalgia factor, is a big appeal to a lot of people, but then you also have the logistical factor of, well, it's a way of producing more boxes, especially when it comes to when these retro things are hit cards, like autograph cards from SP Authentic, for example. So it's a way to produce more boxes and meet the demand that breakers have and stuff like that. So anyway, that was a little bit of a long-winded introduction to the topic. So Aaron, when I kind of just say retro designs, what do you think?
I mean, my initial, thought about retro cards is that I like them. But, as it pertains to the topic, I do agree that there's been so much recently. But as far as, retro cards in general, I do genuinely like them. And I was, a big supporter of, when they sort of burst back onto the scene. I know they've been, around for a while in hockey and other sports as well for a long time. You could pick a retro card, every decade that is, pretty prominent, like I would say. And that's not the point that we're trying to get at. The point that we're trying to get at now is just every single product has a straight up, like I was saying, like copycat of a certain card that, in my opinion, doesn't really need to be copied. Like for example, in the recent MVP product, they had 14, 15, MVP retro cards, and I'm like, that's so strange. Like the last time they did, a true retro in MVP was a couple years ago when they were doing the, you know, retro 99 2000 MVP Stanley Cup edition from 20 years ago. I like that, set. I bought one for my collection just because I remember those MVP cards. They were different. They were still back when that sort of script style that MVP is known for was still kind of new and different. And it was the Stanley Cup edition. It was 20 years ago. It was something cool to kind of bring back to a low end product, and I liked it. But then a couple years later, you have 14, 15 MVP. Like it doesn't really mean the same to me. It was just sort of like, maybe like something to just put in as filler, and it just doesn't really make much sense. Another retro that I really did like is the Crosby tributes. Like seemingly every year they have some Crosby tributes, mixed in, whether it's hockey or other sports. And I like that. Again, it's an iconic design. It was when the cup first launched, and it really is something that you can build on as far as a legacy set. But then they added in some other RPA designs. And again, not saying they're not great cards. Like even that I'm kind of 50-50 on, because it's like, at least you end up with a nice RPA from the cup, albeit a different design than the year you're opening, but still it's a nice limited card. Maybe you can limit it to some few select players that are kind of worth having. like a Gretzky or something like that, or Lemieux, um, and do that every now and then. But it seems like they're always introducing, some different RPA. And aside from the Crosby one, I don't really know if you should really do that. Not saying they're not nice cards, but that to me just, I don't know, just feels a little different.
No
And
one, no one is asking for 2012-13
no,
retro cup
exactly. Or
RPAs.
like 0809. I mean, I love the design, but it just doesn't really make sense to me. 0506 is fine because it's like it is truly iconic. Um, Maybe in a couple of years, you can get away with the McDavid one, maybe, but give it time. And then you can have sort of two sort of 0506 and McDavid's rookie year as well as sort of like these, iconic years of the cup. And maybe in another 10 years you'll have someone else, and that's okay, but make it worth it. It just seems now that things don't really make much sense. Or even with O-Pee-Chee, I know they got in trouble for this, so this isn't exactly the same, but when they threw back the Gretzky rookie year, that was just amazing. And they've done that before, before 0809 O-Pee-Chee. But things like that are truly just, iconic. Recently they did the Parkhurst retros with the 51 52s, and that's just amazing. And like stuff like that, I love a lot. And when they make sense, you can have a whole set um, dedicated to these cards. And I don't think collectors would mind hitting them, or even a few. But when you start having a retro in everything, or clear cut or something like that, where the whole idea of the product is, let's push the acetate stuff, and it's like, okay, that's great, but you just sort of kind of water it down a little bit more, and you have all the retro stuff in it, and it just, I don't know, some of the cards look nice in an acetate form, some don't, and it's just like you're just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. And I don't know if that's the best way to do it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So again, when you say retro cards, my first reaction is I like them, I do. But I think now it just doesn't make much sense. And so if you're going to do retro, again, I think you can keep doing it, but make it make sense. It's just make it make sense, man. And you can keep doing retro as long as you want.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And Greg saying in the comments, tapping into this nostalgia factor, absolutely.
Which is fine. Just do it when it makes sense. Nostalgia is a great thing. It's a powerful thing. It will push product, like no doubt. But make it make sense. Otherwise, people will get sick of it, and it will have the opposite effect of what you're looking for. And to top it all off, people are paying, you know, crazy amounts for these boxes, and you're just getting literally the same thing every product. Oh, here's a retro of a year I didn't care about. Fantastic. It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. Yep. And Kurt kind of chiming into that effect as well. Yeah, I mean, I would largely echo a lot of what you said there. I definitely agree that there is a time and a place for it. I feel like 0809 O-Pee-Chee with the retros is really kind of like the first quote unquote like modern example of them doing it. And obviously that, those cards were a huge success. People loved those.
Even today,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
go for big money, and I think some of the parallel versions out of 100 of some select players, like they've caught on.
Hmm. Yeah, and for good reason. It's an iconic design, and they were recreated, in the exact same format and everything. So it was very well done. Like you said, they got in trouble for that because they didn't own the rights to that design. um,
Yeah, so it's a little different, but I mean, it still hit a chord with collectors. So
yeah, which is why we now see the O-Pee-Chee retro designs are more based on other O-Pee-Chee designs as opposed to recreations of O-Pee-Chee designs. Since obviously Tops owns the actual designs, so that's why they're tweaked a little bit and kind of just more inspired by previous designs. But yes, I mean you kind of go back to that initial, modern retro, so to speak, and it was a great idea. People really enjoyed it, and you kind of have moved forward through the years, and there have been other good examples of that, and things that have made sense and been fun. But fast forward to today, where it's like, okay, I'm opening a box of artifacts, and my rookie redemption is a you know 0506 retro design of Joe Schmo, and I love 0506 artifacts rookie design. It's a great design. They look great, but no one's asking for that. Like no one. There's just not much of a demand for that kind of thing. Like I would rather just have the basic rookie redemption for that year, because that's, I don't know, like that just is more interesting and a better card, and it's a true rookie card. The retros are essentially just a kind of like an insert. So um kind of a lot of things that are like that are more random feeling. It's just like, why are we doing this? Like, not that the designs aren't nice, they are. I don't think there's too many retro designs that we see being done that aren't nice. That's not the problem. It's just that I don't know that we need retro designs for everything under the sun. So um, yeah, and again, it's not to just poo-poo the whole idea. There is a time and a place for it. And when we were kind of talking about this last week, I said, to me, there only need to be 3 retro designs: flagship, which they've done through extended series, which it sounds like that might be changing. I know Billy kind of touched on that, but so that's something to keep an eye on. But I don't mind doing that. Bringing back past flagship designs, I think, is kind of a fun way to do it. And I think they have done that effectively through extended series. I think that's made sense and been well done. Um, Largely because it's not necessarily taking anything away from the rest of the product. It's kind of just like an added thing. It's not like a retro Young Gun is taking the place of a normal Young Gun. So, I don't mind it as much. And obviously, flagship is flagship. It's the iconic product in the hobby every year. And, so it makes sense in that regard. So I would say flagship is one. 0506 Cup RPAs is the second one. Again, for all the reasons you said, Aaron, it's the first year of Cup. It's the most iconic year of the Cup. Some of the biggest cards in the history of the hockey hobby are the Crosby and Ovechkin Cup RPAs. So if you want to use that design and kind of have it be a quote unquote like living set where you're updating it with new players and stuff every year here and there, I don't mind that at all, because it makes sense for the status of that design. And then kind of with that, 0304 Exquisite Collection, just because that is one of the most iconic designs in the history of the sports card hobby as a whole, being the LeBron RPA. So, even though I'm typically not a huge fan of kind of cross sport designs and inserting stuff into other sports and stuff like that, I don't mind it for that, just because it is such an iconic card. So if you're doing that for the top guys, I really don't mind it. So yeah, but like I said, to me, that's all that's needed. Like there is not a need for SP Game used retro rookies, and all of the like I said, almost every product has at least something.
Yeah, it's too
So
much.
it's
Too much.
it's just, yeah, it's way too much, and a lot of it is just like, no one was asking for this. Like, yeah, they're fun. It is cool seeing old designs. I totally get it, 100%. But at the same time, when every single product pretty much has this stuff in it, it really loses that effect. And it becomes not so much an, oh, I remember that, I love that, that's fun, that's cool, it's different. Well, no, when every product has it, it's not different, because every product has it. So, yeah, I don't know. I have definitely not been on board with the influx of retro designs over the last few years. Like I said, there are some that I enjoy and think make sense, but the vast majority, I would say, do not fit that bill. So, yeah, that's kind of where I come
I mean,
from on it.
I would sort of add in, your legacy brands like your Parkhurst. If you want to throw it back, I think you'd be allowed to do that. If we're sort of adding on to your sort of higher end, allowable, retro designs. If say we're moving past this, everything and everything has, retro design. If we were to sort of cap it, I would sort of add on these, legacy brands like your Parkhurst, like O-Pee-Chee. I know we can't copy, those type of designs like the Gretzky, but like I'm just thinking out loud here, copying old O-Pee-Chee retro designs from years ago, just sort of throwing things back a little bit, ways in the future could be kind of cool, along with the older like O-Pee-Chee designs you're allowed to use, and doing a copycat of that. So yeah, I mean, adding in those legacy brands and those legacy cards would be really really cool, and those would sort of be my cap on what's allowed, to copycat straight up. Yeah, because anything more than that, it's too much trouble for, say, the few collectors out there who I think would really gravitate to that sort of year. I mean, I just don't know if, especially in hockey. I mean, in other sports, honestly, I think it would have more success, but in hockey, it's obviously much smaller than other sports. So I just don't think there's that market to really push so many retro cards like we're seeing to have a positive result. I just think, with the amount of people in the hobby and just the way kind of hockey collectors sort of collect, they're more, I guess, um, you know, purist collectors, so to speak. So if it's not the original thing, it's not as good. Um, Not saying that's the truth. I just think that's sort of the vibe in the hobby, I guess, traditionally. So I think, with retro cards, you got to be really, really, really picky at what you do, so that people collectively in the hobby just sort of gravitate towards it. And I think that's stuff like the 0506 stuff, with the RPAs and, the higher end stuff that Eric mentioned, along with some tried and true hockey brands that I think like everyone can sort of, maybe not love, but at the very least appreciate. Like, for example, with Parkhurst, they might not love the cards, but at least they can appreciate it. So I think there's a way that, both sides can be happy a little bit, for people who don't really get all jazzed up about that but can respect it. And then there's those other collectors who love it so much and they'll just want to pick up every card they can of it. I think it's a very fine line in hockey, but I think it's well needed. So I think, looking forward, I think less retro copycat cards would be for the better, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree. And you talking about Parkhurst, I would also say that like the retro stuff in O-Pee-Chee and now Parkhurst Champions, that stuff makes sense because it is building on the established legacy of those product lines, like you said. I know last year with 22-23 Parkhurst Champions, we both thoroughly enjoyed the fact that Billy and his team did those
So
51-52
nice.
Parkhurst
So
minis.
nice.
Very well done. And again, then also having like the wrapper back parallel of that was so cool. Like we love that idea. Great execution. And I know 23-24 Parkhurst Champions will move on to the next year. I believe they're doing 52-53 Parkhurst.
I was just going to say, I hope they do that, which will be just
So
good.
I think that's kind of the game plan there. And Billy talked about that when we talked about that product, but kind of progressively moving forward through the 50s
Which is
over
totally fine.
these next
Totally
few years.
fine.
Great idea.
Oh, so
Um,
good.
and again, like that goes back to what I was saying earlier. There's a time and a place to do this kind of thing. That's the right time and place. So Greg has a good point here. Which is worse, retro epidemic or parallel epidemic?
I would say,
I would say yes.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do like retro cards, so I would say, I don't know. But then I like parallel cards too. I would say retro is the worst one. I think parallels. I mean, I know people hate parallels, but I kind of like them. Although I don't think everything needs a one-of-one parallel. As a whole, I do like parallels. I think, it sucks for player collectors sometimes, but I mean, the more cards of your guy, the better. Although your wallet will not like that answer. At the end of their career, I guess you could say, it'd be kind of cool looking back on all those cards and all those rainbows and stuff. So I think in the long run, I think as far as my collection goes, I like parallels, but yeah, it's a little much sometimes. So I see where you're coming from, but I would have to pick retro as just the worst one of the two.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I mean, parallels obviously have been a long established thing in the hobby. I think obviously what Greg is getting at is, do we need 10, 15, 20 card rainbows? No, we don't.
Yeah, no, you don't. You don't. The odd products like artifacts, I know people kind of hate on that because there's so many parallels in artifacts, but artifacts was always like that. And I mean, if you're gonna have a product that really leans heavily into the parallels or adds a couple new ones, I think artifacts is the perfect one to sort of lean into that if you want to add a couple more in. Same thing with O-Pee-Chee Platinum. It's a relatively new product, but I mean it had you know heavily leaned into the parallels since day one. So I mean, if you want to add a couple more in, great. But I mean, should every product be like the next O-Pee-Chee Platinum? No. So I think if you scale back on those products and then you lean into the parallels when it comes to those specific products, so at least collectors know what they're getting, I think that would make more sense versus taking every product and adding a parallel or two or three into every single one. It just, that part I think is what is kind of annoying collectors a little bit, because you take a product that wasn't really as parallel focused and you make it parallel focused, it just changes the whole idea of the product, I think. Especially with one of ones, like every product needing a certain one of one parallel just doesn't really make sense, like O-Pee-Chee, or I remember Ice had those base parallels, and it was just, these cards didn't really, these brands didn't really lean the one-on-ones in that way. So why are we doing this? That stuff doesn't make sense to me. Whereas artifacts, if you want to add in a new one of one, or O-Pee-Chee Platinum, yeah, do it. Allure, which is kind of the new O-Pee-Chee Platinum, fine, okay, but take those products, lean into parallels all you want. People like them or hate them, that's fine, but they'll have other products for that other traditional sort of look to them. And then collectors can go there, or they can go towards the parallel cities and go nuts. But making every product, the next artifacts, platinum, allure, just that I think is what is annoying people.
Yeah, and for those who haven't heard, 24-25 MVP is joining that trend
MVP,
of.
same thing. They have one-on-ones now, and it's just like, no, it's not meant to have that 1, 2, 3 max. Cool, do it, but don't make MVP the next artifacts like that. That to me is what is annoying collectors. It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. So yeah, that was a good question you posed there, Greg. And then kind of one other element of this conversation, largely we've kind of just been talking about the general concept of retro designs and how people feel about them. But another important element of this is how it actually impacts the appeal and desirability and breaking experience of products. And I think the product that immediately comes to mind when thinking about that is SP Authentic, like I kind of touched on
Yep.
earlier, where it's so heavily focused on the Future Watch autos, and that's what people want to be pulling. Now, with so many retro Future Watches throughout the product, it's pretty much like as likely to pull a Future Watch retro as it is to pull a current year design. And that's a huge problem because nowadays you're only guaranteed one Future Watch auto within a box of SP Authentic, and that could be a retro. So you could open box after box after box and not get a single current year design Future Watch auto. And that has, I mean, depending on who you ask, obviously the product still sells very well. People still break it like nuts. And I get that. Cards still sell well, all that. But it has really, really hurt the desire and appeal of that product for a lot of people, especially when it comes to opening it, just because they want to be pulling those Future Watch autos, the true Future Watch autos of big name players and all that, and you're not even guaranteed that anymore within a break. So, um, to me, that's a textbook example of how this has become a huge problem in the hobby, where now everything has retros. And like I said, if it's 50-50 or even greater that you will pull a retro as opposed to the true current design, in a iconic product every year, and people are chasing those true Future Watches, it's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, it won't. But I was just thinking out loud. I mean, will the parallel or the retro cards be the next jersey card? Where at first it was like, this is so cool, and then you have too much of them, and it's like, 10 years later, after you, ruin the market on these cards that were, in a concept, a good idea, and a good card, you just sort of run it into the ground, and then 10 years later, you're like, let's pull back on this. You know what I mean? Similar to jersey cards, where they were, a big thing, and it was a great concept and all that stuff, but you put it everywhere, and then eventually collectors say, nah, I don't want that here. Over here is fine, but here, no, 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 no. There's too much jersey cards here, and like let's just pull back and kind of make it more simple. So I mean, are we seeing that here a little bit with not so much the retros, but more parallel cards? When bringing up that topic as well, like an MVP, where it's like let's make it parallel city, and then 10 years later they're like let's pull back to what it traditionally was meant to be, and just sort of learn our lesson a little bit too late. So I think maybe that's what we're seeing happen now, but I hope not. But maybe it'll change soon, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think that is something that Billy touched on. I think when we were talking about extended, and saying how well I think we're gonna kind of go away from being just purely retro focused in the product. Not purely, but heavily, I guess would be a more accurate way of putting it. Um, so maybe they are starting to realize that and say, hey, people are getting burnt out on this. We need to kind of go in a different direction and not so heavily feature retro designs, across the board. So, it'll definitely be interesting to keep an eye on how things progress over the next few years. Obviously, people need to remember that the timeline for building products is pretty much always at least 12 months at this point. So, you might say today, we're gonna go away from using retros so much. Well, you're not actually gonna see that take effect for at least another year, on top of when that decision was made. So, that's something to keep in mind, that this type of thing does not happen overnight. It's a very lengthy process, and a lot goes into it. And yeah, but I mean, based on some things that Billy kind of hinted at, it does feel like they might be kind of realizing we got to scale back on this, and hopefully that's the case, because I don't hate the idea of retro designs, but it's got to make sense, like you were saying, Aaron. It's got to be the right time and place, and when it is, they're really cool and really fun. I mean, like we were saying, those Parkhurst retros in Parkhurst Champions are awesome. I think everybody across the board loves those cards because they make sense. So yeah, I don't know that I have too much more to say on it. I
Me
mean,
neither. I think
yeah,
the point's been made, so I guess you guys can make your own decisions about that. And again, nothing against the cards themselves. I mean, if you show me a cool retro card, chances are I'm going to like it because it's cool. And at the core, the concept I like. I just think time and place, like everything else, time and place is very important. So that's all I have to say on it. So yeah, it's been a great discussion.
I know one of the comments we threw up earlier was Kurt saying that the companies need to have new ideas, and then bringing things full circle. New idea, but ends.
Exactly. You know what we just talked about. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, the good thing about a lot of cards out there from different companies is that people can choose what they want, and there's something out there for everybody. So, which is a really good thing. So, might not all be licensed, but that's another discussion for another day. So, yeah, collect what you like. It's a tried and true saying. So,
Kind of one other thing, a comment that our buddy Ryan uh, said almost a half an hour ago at this point. So sorry, we're just now getting to it. But the renewed Young Guns, I think that is kind of an interesting conversation tied to all of this as well. Obviously, based on prior designs, I think what kind of differentiates those is it's not just purely a completely recycled design. You're taking the bones of an old design, but then you're making it renewed. It's a fresh play on that design. So to me, it's a little bit different. I like the idea, and I think they've been well received. And I don't mind that it's kind of just, it seems, hopefully, maybe, that it's just a thing for this year. I would not be a fan of if this is every single year for 3, 4, 5 years, where pretty much every single Young Gun is now being redone. I think there has to be a limit with those. So if they're being careful and they're only doing, 5 or 10 at most per season, and kind of limiting it to a year or maybe 2 years, I think that's fine. And like I said, they've been well received. People enjoy them. And they are, a refreshed play on the original design. So it's a little bit different. So yeah, just wanted to make sure that we brought that up, since I know Ryan commented about that earlier, and obviously those have been hot button topic cards over the last few months. So yeah, just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. And Ryan just commented again here. Yeah, that's something that people have talked about as well. Should they be numbered or short printed? It is important to note that there are the exclusives and high gloss parallels of those cards. So there is kind of a built-in scarcity in that regard. I know when we had Billy on to talk about Series 1, he was kind of saying, well, this artist has done stuff for other products before, but it's been on one of ones and cards that are so scarce that no one's actually seeing his work. So we want to make it where these are very attainable cards. You see a lot of them.
That's fair.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that was a good way to do it, honestly. Kind of, people also look at the retro Outburst Young Guns. Those were pretty short printed, all things considered. I'm not saying they're wildly limited, but they're not, nearly as common as a normal Young Gun or anything like that. So, or even as common as the current Outburst Young Guns. They're still pretty difficult pulls. So that's kind of, they went that route with those cards, but then the renewed ones are much more common, so people can enjoy the art. Which, like I said, I think that was a good way to do it. So just, even though that's a good idea, obviously, like I said, would like to see them keep things under control with that and not go too crazy. So we'll see. I know that they'll be coming back for Series 2. And I guess we'll see after that. But yeah, obviously, like I said, well received and fun cards. And yeah, we'll see what the future holds for those. But I don't think that I have too much else to say about that. Obviously, don't want to just ramble for rambling's sake. I don't know. Is there anything else about retro designs or anything else we talked about that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
I don't. I think just the moral of the story, the moral of this episode is just less is more. And I'll leave it at that.
I think that is a very fitting way to wrap things up. Yep, I would agree. So yeah, I think we'll kind of leave it as a short and sweet episode. Not too short, 54 minutes at this point, but don't want to, like I said, don't want to just talk just for talking's sake. So we'll wrap things up at that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, like I've said the last few times, we do our shows live and, in a live stream format now on Facebook and YouTube. So if you guys are not subscribed specifically on those platforms, especially on YouTube, I know they have the bell button you can click that gives you notifications whenever we plan to go live and when we do go live. So that's a good way to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes. And then, of course, as always, please be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Sunrise Cardcast, and on Twitter at CICC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Sunrise Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.